Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Yeah, as you say, I was invited to come and talk about resilience, and I've been learning a little bit about some of the people that are on the call today. And I understand a lot of you, you sort of work on your own. I know that the work you do can be quite thankless, and it's one of those industries where often you don't sort of hear from people until things go wrong. But I also have heard very high reports of respect for what you do because you're passionate about what you do and you keep trucking on, and it shows. I have to say, my immediate thought was, well, you already sound pretty resilient, to be honest, and kudos. But actually, maybe that's the point, because in my experience, often, it's the most resilient people that we forget about. Um, and I think that was something that the organizers, I got that message loud and clear from the people organizing it. So the first thing I wanted to say was just thank you very much for everything that you do, and this is our chance just to recognize it, and hope that you sort of do feel a little bit appreciated. But also, I completely understand that just because you look kind of resilient on the outside or you appear resilient doesn't mean that you always feel it, particularly when you kind of feel like you're constantly, under pressure or dealing with lots of, new challenges. So I think that's the reason that I was invited, because there were lots of times in my military career where I also had to be pretty resilient, stay tough when things got sort of tricky. So I'm going to share some tips that I learned. I've got a couple of stories to share with you on how we can kind of stay tough and keep smiling, even when things get tricky for us. The second thing I wanted to talk about was, I understand as well that there is an expectation, I suppose, on us to keep growing, keep evolving, embracing new techniques, new ideas, new technology even. And that can feel a bit daunting as well. So I'm going to cover that as well. So let me start with the resilience thing. And I wanted to share a story with you, and take you to probably the toughest military training that I've ever been to in my life, where I had to be pretty resilient. And it's called resistance to interrogation. I don't know if any of you have heard of this. And it's kind of exactly what it sounds like. So the unfortunate truth is, when we go into other countries, they're not always that happy about us being in their country. And if we get shot down, we will probably be captured and interrogated and tortured, which is going to be horrific, clearly. So the military wanted to prepare us for this. And the way they did it was we got to practice this. So we would sort of go on the run for about 2 weeks, sleeping in ditches, getting very cold, wet and hungry. And then eventually after 2 weeks, we'd be captured and taken off to be interrogated and tortured. Now, before you start sort of writing to the European Court of Human Rights, we were not actually tortured, but they've got ways of making it very kind of, realistic and very, very unpleasant. So it's fair to say that I was dreading this particular experience. But I did have a plan, because I had learned from the stories that circulated that one of the first things that would happen when I got captured is that I would be stripped down to my underwear. And I had a particularly ridiculous pair of superhero underpants that I was quite fond of. And I remember thinking, on a bit of a whim, I'm going to wear these pants. I don't know what I was expecting would happen, but my instinct told me it was a choice I'd be grateful for down the line. And I remember when I was there, they were in the prison cell, and the captors are playing their role, and they're sort of jeering at you and calling you names and all the rest of it. And I sort of revealed these pants, and they were momentarily speechless. And one of them was definitely suppressing the urge to smile. And I remember in that moment, standing shivering in that cell, thinking, you can choose when I eat, you can choose when I sleep, you can even choose when I go to the loo. But you don't get to choose what pants I put on this morning. And standing there shivering in my prison cell, I felt kind of strong and I felt powerful. So I think that taught me a couple of things, because we were taught how to be resilient, and one of the things that they always taught us was to kind of celebrate the small wins. And one of the things I learned was just finding humor in the darkness of situations really helped me to stay strong, during difficult times. And so that was the first thing I wanted to sort of share with you, is that, even if you feel like sometimes you're under the cosh, um, actually, and I'm not saying the people you work with are like prison guards, but if they do feel like that sometimes, sometimes you can still just choose to find it kind of funny and find the humor in the darkest of places. And I find that's really helpful. But I think the second lesson that it taught me was about the power of choice. We live in a world where clearly lots of choices get taken away from us. We've got to follow orders. We've got to do what we're told. In the military, that is very true. But there is one choice that no one can ever take away from us, and that is kind of how we respond to any incident. So no matter what gets thrown at us, we can choose how we respond, and we can choose what mindset to have. And I appreciate that's quite hard when you feel like you're kind of, really up against it. So my top tip to you is, if you need something to remind you that you always have a choice, then invest in a range of superhero underpants, because I can highly recommend. You can buy them on Amazon, and they're great. And whenever I feel the need to remind myself that I can always choose to see the funny side of things, I reach for my superhero pants. So I hope that is a little bit helpful, and hopefully a bit of fun, because life is too short, isn't it, to always be looking on the bad side of things. So that was the first story that I wanted to share with you. But I also know that there is a need, like I said, for you to keep evolving, keep growing, embracing all these new things. And I think it's okay to admit that maybe you might feel, actually, can I do this? This is a bit kind of beyond what I'm comfortable with. So I really wanted to just share with you that it's more than possible. And even if you think that maybe other people don't believe you can do it, even if you think you don't believe you can do it, you probably can. So I'm going to share my second story with you. So believe it or not, I was actually the first female helicopter pilot to fly special forces missions. And I remember being quite proud of myself for doing that. But there was a little bit of resistance when I started out. And I remember the boys were kind of saying, well, you can't fly special forces, Sarah, because you're a girl. And I'm a bit stubborn. So I said, well, why? Um, and they said, well, where you're based, the bases where the special forces are, it's very austere, it's not set up for women. In fact, there aren't even any female showers. So you would be forced to share a shower block with big, tough, good looking men. And I remember at this point saying, I see no downsides here. I'm absolutely fine. Where do I start? And the sort of look on their faces, they were like, oh, right, okay. So we agreed that I didn't have a problem with that. So I said, okay, how about this one then, Sarah? You would compromise the mission, because if the helicopter gets in trouble and it goes down in hostile territory, then the special forces, they're going to want to protect you. They won't be able to help themselves because you're a woman, and therefore you would compromise their mission. So I challenged it, and I said, would you mind asking the special forces if this is the case? And to their credit, they did. And this was the response that came back. They said, if the helicopter goes down and we're on a mission, you won't see us. We'll be running faster than any of you can run towards our target. Because the sort of missions they were going on, they were judged to be the highest strategic importance to our national security. And these missions have been months, sometimes years in the planning, and they've got a scarily small window to complete this mission. So they weren't going to switch their focus at that point to babysitting pilots. They were going to stay focused on their mission. And I remember when we realized this, there was a bit of a gulp amongst all the air crews. We realized that they're not going to become our personal bodyguards, and we might actually have to defend ourselves. But I also remember feeling really proud that they trusted that I could get on with my job, and that by trusting me to get on with my job, they were allowed to get on with their job. And I think what I took away from that is, actually, we're capable of extraordinary things when we just believe. And in this case, it wasn't even me that believed in me. It was these special forces people that thought, well, she'll be fine. So I think what I wanted to share with you is, whether you realize it or not, there are people out there that believe in you. They might not shout about it, but they do believe in you. And if they believe in you, then maybe you can believe in you too. And you will amaze yourself at what you can achieve. And that means that you can lean into discomfort, you can embrace new ideas. It won't feel comfortable, but actually that's the point, because actually our best growth and our best learning happens when it feels a little bit uncomfortable. And there's lots of science to prove that. So if you feel uncomfortable, this isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. It's actually a sign you're doing it right. So please take this as an invitation to lean into a little bit of discomfort, because you are capable and you will achieve amazing things. The second lesson that I learned from that, I mean, it's the final lesson that I wanted to end on, was I didn't used to tell this story. As you've heard, I'm a professional speaker, and I never used to talk about it because I suppose I just thought, well, why would I talk about this? It was just part of the job. And it wasn't until I heard another female who was a Chinook the cruise chick, as she called herself. And they'd asked her, oh, well, were you flying special forces missions? And she said, no, because girls couldn't do it because they compromised the mission. And I was astounded because she'd come through after me. So there was no reason why she shouldn't have been able to fly special forces missions. But then I kind of thought, well, why would she know? Because I hadn't told anyone what I was doing. And maybe if I had, and it seems terribly un-British, doesn't it? Sort of, blow our own trumpet. But maybe if I had, that learning could have crossed, from one squadron to another, and other people would have been able to go out and do these things. So I think the lesson I want to end on is you are brilliant, and you probably are blazing trails that you don't even realize you're doing. So do blow your trumpet a little bit, because not only does it feel good, but other people will benefit and other people will be inspired by what you are doing on a daily basis. Even though you think it's just part of what you do, other people will find it amazing. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you. We've got a couple of minutes. I'm just going to go in and check the chat and just see if there are any questions. But yeah, thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for your service. You are brilliant. Remember to wear superhero pants, and remember that if it's uncomfortable, that's where you do your best work. Okay, lots of love. Has anyone got any questions they want to throw into the chat? I'm just having a look at some. I can see we've got Superman tops. Okay, I'm going to hand over to the studio.